Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another Gran Turismo 7 car review. This time I'm doing my updated reviews for the JGTC Legends, the first which came out the other day, being the Tom's Castrol Supra, which is a Gran Turismo icon, and now we're going to turn our attention to this, the R34 Pennzoil GTR. From the 1999 season to be exact, and there's a bit of a weirdness to this car. A lot of people look at this thing and assume that the kind of reference on the top with the 98 champion is actually to do with the this car itself, but it's actually to do with the R33. Nissan did eventually dethrone the Supra, taking the drivers and I believe the manufacturer's championship with the final year of the R33 GTR. Then for the 99 season they introduced this, the R34 Skyline. Now quickly touch on price point. It's around about 2.5 mil for this one, so it is around about, you know, sort of 700,000 credits more than the Tom's Castrol Supra, but does it live up to kind of the same performance? In a way yes, and in a way no. Now this one you cannot get for free no matter what, you do have to buy it. I know a lot of people absolutely love this car, but I'm going to start off by being a little bit critical. I don't actually love the R34 GTR. Yeah, I know, behead me or whatever. But for me, the most iconic GTR model will always be the R32, just for what that did to motorsport. The fact that it was so successful, earned the car the nickname Godzilla, and then obviously that's kind of been sort of used loosely all the way up to the likes of the R35 GTR, which we obviously currently see. But we're going to move back quickly to the R34. Was this car itself successful? In a way yes, and in a way no. Now I believe in terms of the JGTC season of the 1999 championship, this car really kind of didn't do what the other models actually did for Nissan. Obviously the 98 championship, they took the drivers and the constructors, but they had a lot bigger and tougher competition with the 99 season. Obviously the Hondas, the Toyotas of the time were just, you know, rearing and ready to go. They just took an absolute beating the season before, and it was time for them to step it up. Now this car, I believe, didn't actually score a point until its fourth race of the season, and really didn't kind of do what Nissan expected it to do. You know, this thing was supposed to be a new model. It was supposed to be absolutely, you know, kind of dominant and continue where they kind of left off in the 98 season with that R33 GTR, which is a kind of throwback on the roof of this car, which is where it kind of gets mixed up with some, you know, people where they think this is a 98 model, but it's kind of titled wrong. No, this is the 99 model. But yeah, it did, you know, do well. It did eventually get the Drivers' Championship, but it took till 4 rounds in to actually do something. I believe overall it only took a single victory in terms of the overall season, and the main thing that actually carried it to that championship was its reliability and such. Apart from that, it really wasn't as successful as probably both Nismo and Nissan really wanted it to be, and as people actually expected. You know, Honda had come along with the, at the time, a pretty aging NSX that had been out a long time. Same with the Supra. Yes, they kind of have different aero specs, and you know, they kind of had new kits on them and such like that, but this was a brand new model, and I think Nissan really banked on this car being much more dominant. Okay, yes, usually you get them sort of first season wobbles where a new car might not be as good, but considering this car in reality was very technologically advanced, it didn't wipe the floor in the way that most people would have probably expected it to, which is why in terms of loving the R34 GTR, for me it's more of a street car than it ever really was a race car. It never, in my opinion, lived up to the likes of the R32 or had the aggressiveness of the R33. Although that was a bit of a botch job in terms of its road car, it was still a successful race car, whereas the R34 just doesn't seem to kind of live up to that credit. In terms of, you know, its crowning glory, I feel like this one here, the 99, was perhaps the most well-known and successful of the bunch. When I think other R34 GTR race cars, I just constantly turn to the likes of the tuner culture of the time and the R34 being the big thing of the early 2000s in terms of, you know, high horsepower builds. Even to this day, you know, it's a very loved street car, but I think in terms of its racing pedigree, it just never, you know, carried the torch as well as the likes of the R32 or the R33. But overall, it is not a terrible car. And let's just quickly touch on it within Gran Turismo 7. How does this thing feel to drive? Well, surprisingly enough, it feels better overall to drive than the Thomas Castrol Supra. It feels more grippier, it feels like it handles the corners much better, but overall in terms of, you know, top speed and stuff, that's where I feel like it's let down and the Supra kind of has the edge. But apart from that, when you go into the tight and twisty sections, you always feel confident with this car, you know, in this car. I really don't have any complaints about this car, to be honest. I think it's one of those cars that, whilst it was great at launch and it was great when I first reviewed it, going back now with what I actually think is improved physics, and I know people probably do not agree with me there, but more kind of true to life physics in terms of the weight of the car, and the cars aren't as zippy as they used to be. It does overall kind of benefit the GTR. It kind of makes itself known that this is a much more grippy car. It really does feel like a proper GT500 car of the time, whereas the sort of Supra at times can feel a little bit kind of, I guess, really outdated, although it's only 2 years, you know, older than this thing. I feel like the technological side of it and the sort of improvements to aero and the more aggressive styling of the JGTC cars from sort of this era onwards, especially kind of the 99 and 2000 season, really shines through when you're driving this 99 GTR. There's no doubt in that. There's definitely a big leap from where the Supra was at and the kind of cars that ran around with it in the 97 season to where the Skyline R34 kind of was introduced, and, you know, kind of where the competition was at that point. And you do get a feeling with that, with how this car drives. You know, it's very, very good. It's very, very insanely grippy through the corners. You don't feel like it's going to break away. And in terms of styling, you know, this is when the R34 looks absolutely fantastic in my opinion. The JGTC GT500 kit that this thing runs is absolutely stunning and looks better than any road going version ever could. It's more sleek. It almost looks like it sort of sits on the ground in terms of its stance. You know, I kind of look at the R34 GTR as quite a bulky, quite tall car, and then you kind of see their GT500 model and all of a sudden it looks absolutely fantastic. It looks really low, it looks aggressive, and overall it's just a fantastic and joyous car to drive in GT7. So let's go ahead and finish up this lap as we've given you some history and I've given you a bit of info what the car feels like in GT7 to see where this thing actually ranks. And unbelievably, it's slower than the Thomas Castrol Supra. There is actually a performance point deficit to the Castrol Supra, which is rather quite surprising considering this is a more modern car. And in terms of its lap time, well, it's around about just over 2 seconds a lap slower at the Nordschleife. But does that kind of take away from just how good this car feels? Absolutely not. In terms of just outright a great feeling car to drive and one that you're going to have plenty of hours of joyous driving in, then, well, the Skyline is absolutely unmatched. Another little hint, by the way, take this thing out at night and go into the outside car view and watch the flames pop. This is one of the best points about this car in terms of its quirks, but overall it's a very, very good car to drive. Let me know what you think. Do you prefer the Thomas Castrol Supra or do you prefer the Pennzoil Skyline when it comes to GT7? Part of me wants to really choose the Skyline, mainly because of that nighttime kind of flamethrower out the side that this thing gives off, but overall for me, the Thomas Castrol Supra is just a lot more iconic. But let me know what you think down below. Those are the two JGTC GT500 Legends reviewed, both sit in Group 3, and there's really not too much difference between them. I'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Peace.